This is part one of how to go through and complete the square to solve a quadratic equation. In this screencast, I'm going to work with x squared that has an even number in front of x. The process to complete the square is up in front of you on the screen. The first thing you have to do is check to see if one side of your quadratic equation is that perfect trinomial square. In other words, it might look something like x squared plus 6x plus 9. And the way you can check that is take a look at that 6x here, it's 6 in the middle. If I can take that 6 and divide it by 2, which is 3, and then square the 3 and end up with the 9 at the end, then we have a perfect trinomial square. This is assuming, of course, you have 1 in front of your x squared. If it's not, or if it is, you can factor it and skip on to step 6. If it's not, you need to go through the full process. First thing you'll do then is add or subtract your constants. So the constants on one side, variables on the other. This third step we are not going to use in this particular slide, but if for some reason you have like 2x squared or 3x squared, you have to divide both sides by that coefficient because you want to have 1x squared. Very important to make sure you get all those terms and divide it by that. We do want to leave those in fraction form. It will be easier to square and add. The actual complete the square process is in steps 4 and 5. We will want to look at our coefficient of x, divide by 2, and square that result. The suggestion is to remember what that result happens to be before you squared it. Then you will add that result to both sides. You want to make sure it factors into a quantity squared, like x plus 3 the quantity squared. Take your square root of both sides to get rid of the quantity squared. Don't forget that the area important, plus or minus. And then finish by solving for x. So let's get ourselves to an example so you can see how the process goes. I have x squared plus 10x plus 25 is equal to 49. I want to see, is it a perfect trinomial square? I suspect it might be because of that 25. Let's check the 10 in the middle. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Take the 5 and square it. It does equal that 25 at the end, so I think I have a quantity squared. I believe this is going to factor into x plus 5, the quantity squared. Here's that 5 from the dividing by 2 part. It's still equal to 49. Take square root of each side so I can not have the quantity squared anymore. And that gives me x plus 5 is equal to plus or minus 7. Subtract 5 from each side. So we have x is equal to negative 5 plus or minus 7. We actually need to know the numeric answers, so we're going to take negative 5 plus 7, which is 2. Or we can take the negative 5 minus 7, which will give me negative 12. And those are my two answers. Let's try one that's not a perfect square to start. X squared plus 4x minus 21 is equal to 0. That minus 21 clues me in it's not a perfect square because it's not a perfect square. I can't square a number and get 21. So we're going to add 21 to each side. I get x squared plus 4x. We put a plus blank equals 21 plus blank. And we need a blank on each side because what we do to one side, we need to do to the other to keep it balanced. Okay, take the 4, divide it by 2. That's 2. Take the 2, square it. That's 4. That 4 goes in the blanks that I'm going to add. That completes a perfect square trinomial, so I can factor it on that left side. X plus 2, the quantity squared. The other side I have 25. Again, take square root of each side. That gives me x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus 5. And finish by subtracting 2 from each side to solve for x. And that gives me negative 2 plus or minus 5. Negative 2 plus 5 is 3. Negative 2 minus 5 is negative 7. So my two possible answers are x equals 3 or x equals negative 7. Let's go with this one. X squared minus 2x minus 15 equals 0. Okay, so again, not a perfect square because 15 is not a perfect square. Add my 15 to each side. So that gives me x squared minus 2x, again put in my plus blank, equals 15 plus blank. Take the negative 2 in front of the x, divide by 2, that gives me negative 1. Square my negative 1, and remember, if you're doing this in the calculator, you do need parentheses around that negative 1, otherwise the calculator thinks you are taking 1, squaring it, and make it negative. When we square that, we get 1 to add to each side. And so I can now factor the left side into x minus 1, the quantity squared. The total on the right side is 16. Take square root of each side. X minus 1 is equal to plus or minus 4. And last but not least, add 1 to each side. So that gives me 1 plus or minus 4. 1 plus 4 is 5. And 1 minus 4 is negative 3. So my two answers are x equals negative 5, or positive 5, or x equals negative 3. Okay, let's do x squared plus 6x plus 11 equals 0. Once again, not a perfect square. Subtract the 11. X squared plus 6x, put in my plus blank, equals negative 11 plus blank. You know, I think that was supposed to be a minus 11 when I started the problem. There we go. Add 11, so that's positive 11. There we go. Did not mean to copy that down wrong. So we now need to figure out what number goes in the blank. Take the 6, divide it by 2. That gives me 3. Take the 3, square it. That gives me 9. Add that 9 to each side. Factor my left side, and that gives me x plus 3 quantity squared. On the right side, that gives me 20. Now this time when I go to take square root, it doesn't come out nice and even. So we're just going to leave the square root there. And that gives me x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 20. This is called exact form. And finish by subtracting the 3. X equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 20. And you are allowed to leave your answer in that form. One last example. Let's go with x squared minus 14x plus 17 equal to 0. Again, not a perfect square. I'm going to subtract my 17, and that gives me x squared minus 14x, put in my plus blank, equals negative 17 plus a blank. Take the negative 14, divide by 2, that's negative 7. Square my negative 7. Again, remembering parentheses when I put that in the calculator if I don't know it. That gives me positive 49 to add to each side. Left side factors into x minus 7 quantity squared, that minus 7 we remembered. And when we add 49 and negative 17, that gives me 32. Take square root of each side. That gives me x minus 7 equals plus or minus the square root of 32. And finish by adding my 7, and that gives me 7 plus or minus the square root of 32. And that includes the first part of completing the square. These are, again, where x squared has a coefficient of 1, and you have an even coefficient of x. Thank you.